Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rangers Review for your Saturday morning show. This is a new excerpt from the Rangers Review that we're bringing you. Usually myself and Josh here in the studio. Josh, I would say it's great to see you, but it's not been the best of weeks in all things Rangers. Obviously coming in off the back of that Roma defeat the other night. Yeah, it's just a little bit apathetic at the minute, I think would be the word.
Yeah, a lot of heavy sighs waking up Saturday morning. People bravely listening to some more Rangers content or consuming it. We had 1 week of talking about football last week, and the last couple of games have kind of not encouraged us to talk about more. But as ever, there is stuff to discuss. We're going to focus on Europe and actually just how bad Rangers have been in Europe, if people can bear it. And then we're going to talk a bit about recruitment and maybe have a bit of a wider conversation. You know, we're in November, Blair. We've seen quite a lot of football now. We're nearing the halfway point in the season, so I think it's a fair enough time to get into some of those topics.
I feel like this Saturday is just becoming group therapy at this point, maybe for you and I, maybe for you as well, watching, where we can just get all of our gripes and moans out about the team. But I think before we get into the topics that we're going to discuss today, I think one of the things that really stuck with me from Thursday night was just how timid the team were, just how it was a lot of nothing, really. I think that's the way that people have summed it up after that, and I couldn't agree more. It was just the idea of Rangers being a force in Europe just seems so far away from what is in this team. Rangers Thursdays are dead. Long live Rangers Thursdays, but it's just not there anymore. And I think you've seen that as well in the build-up to the game. I remember a few years ago, you look at that run, especially to the final, the Borussia Dortmund games, the Braga games, the Leipzig game, of course, and Roma Ibrox on a Thursday night would have been something you'd base your week around. You'd be excited for it from the Monday. But even on the Thursday afternoon, there was just a general shrug of the shoulders and, do we have to play this game? I think that was really the feeling.
Yeah, and there's only 41,000 people there, and how often is that? How often has that happened in recent years? You even just think of the teams that Rangers competed with and got results against last season in the Europa League. So USG, who are now in the Champions League and Champions of Belgium, Man United, Olympiacos, Nice. Who else am I missing? A number of other teams too.
Yeah.
It was basically the top 8 that Rangers
Spurs
played.
as well,
Spurs, they're so incredibly far off that standard of last season. Do you know what it reminded me of? Thursday night was the game Rangers played against Lyon and Steven Gerrard's just before Gerrard left. Very different time, and I think people would take that squad just now.
Yes.
But there was an apathy that night because it felt like the club hadn't kicked on. It felt like this wasn't an improvement on kind of what had gone before. And the reason it reminded me was because Lyon just kind of like played in second gear, got through and didn't have that experience that so many European teams have had of, this is a difficult place to go, and the crowd make it that. As you rightly say, last night was just felt like a non-event. And although Rangers had a few more attempts on target in that second half, Roma genuinely did seem like they were in first or second gear and played for 30 minutes. The second goal kind of epitomised the game because they just popped it around Rangers who couldn't get close to them. There seemed to be that physical gap between the two sides. And as you say, long live Rangers Thursdays, because that has always remained in the midst of some domestic struggles.
Remember when we used to complain about the domestic form being bad, but we always used to say, why can this team do it on a Thursday? Now we're at a point where we can't even do it on a Thursday.
I know. And it's worrying, and we might as well jump straight into it, Blair. But I have some stats that don't paint a hugely optimistic figure. So to start with the top line, people will have seen this by now. 7 European defeats on the spin is the worst run in the club's history in Europe. Rangers have scored 3 and conceded 19 during that stretch of matches. That obviously goes back to Champions League qualifiers and starting right back in Victoria Pilsen. In January, Rangers held the longest unbeaten European away run in Scottish football history. If they lose to Braga next, which is entirely possible with the chart I'm going to throw up in a minute, it would equal the longest losing streak on the continent of any Scottish side. If we bring up on the screen just now the expected goals difference, this basically demonstrates, Blair, that this is no blip. So all this is shown here is the underlying numbers, and it's the expected goals difference is the chances that Rangers are creating. So expected goals just basically measuring the quality of shots, and minus the quality of shots chances that Rangers are conceding. that has them 35th out of 36 teams in this competition.
Yeah.
So again, it's not as if you're maybe looking at it and going, they've just had a bad run of it in a few games. The underlying numbers show like they're exactly where they're supposed to be. They've conceded the highest expected goals average in the entire competition, 1.96 per game. And for context, last season, after playing the top 8 in the competition in the newly formed group stage, Rangers were 8th in terms of expected goal difference out of 36.
Yeah. So just to break this down, this graph that you can see on the screen right now, this basically proves that Rangers are giving up more big chances than they were quite a long way last season, and they're also not making anywhere near the same amount of big chances as they were at the same point last year.
Yeah, exactly. So all you can see is the teams that are in the red are generating a lot more chances than they're conceding, because this is an average. So you can see young boys at the top, Braga, who Rangers have next, Genk, who beat Rangers in the first match day, Roma, who beat Rangers last night. And you can see right at the bottom, only FCSB, who Rangers played last season, didn't they? And they beat quite convincingly at home. They're the only team who are conceding and creating at a worse rate than Rangers are, and it's a big drop off from last season. Why is this the case? Just thinking about it earlier today, there really hasn't been like people in sport speak about a ceiling and a floor, don't they? And like what do you fall back on? What's your kind of performance when things aren't going well or you make changes in the team? There's been no floor. There's been like no base level of, okay, maybe we don't generate a lot of chances, but we're not going to concede. Maybe we're not going to win, but we don't lose. And I think what you saw from 2018 to 2025 was 2018 was like 2018 to 2021 was the last sustained squad building to a certain goal over a period of time. So we're going to talk about recruitment. Rangers have signed 13, 11 and 9 players in the last 3 summers with different people in charge, with different directions, with different ideas. Steven Gerrard, when he first came to the club, had to basically get Rangers hard to beat in Europe so they could get the finances to build the squad. He built a core of a team with that in mind, that kind of existed right through until 2025 and was complemented by coaches like Van Bronckhorst and Clement, who struggled domestically but were more comfortable in these European competitions. But you looked at that last night and there was it didn't look like the Rangers team that we've known, as you say, even when they've had bad domestic moments in Europe, partly because I think this is a team that generally has been built to like dominate the ball with Russell Martin at the start of the season. And I think that physical gap that you saw compared to someone like Roma last night, that hasn't existed for me in the same way last night as it has in previous years.
No, because it seemed that previous Rangers teams were always physical. They were always able to be organised and they were always able to hit on the break. And I think that is one of the reasons why Rangers were so successful in Europe in the past few years, because they were always a great counter-attacking team. They always had pace and they were always disciplined enough to sit in and then hit teams on the break, and they had a bit of cutting edge up front. I think you think back to Istanbul, you think back to that game against Fenerbahce. That I remember being in the stadium that night and I wasn't hoping for anything, to be honest, because I think you're in that kind of atmosphere and you think, okay, this is going to be really difficult. But Rangers were able to do a job that night, and they were able to sit in and they were able to build on a pretty solid defensive point to then have. We've got runners over the top. We've got Václav Černý who can go out and make a difference. You've got Cyril Dessers who can, for all of his criticisms, it was always dangerous. He was always, he could pull out moments of genius, he could pull out moments of brilliance, and they had that ability to hit teams when there was space. And you could see that's why it didn't work domestically, because he couldn't break down those blocks. They didn't have the guile, they didn't have the ingenuity to actually break down the Scottish teams that were sitting 2 banks in front of them. But when they got into Europe, there was more space, and you could see that there were good players there who could play. Now, like you say, to follow on from that point you just made, Rangers have attempted to build a squad to dominate domestically with small players, technical players that can keep the ball, but it seems like they can't handle the intricacies and the pressure of domestic football. So if they've not got that going for them, they also aren't good enough to compete on the European level, because they don't have that ability to attack space. They don't have that ability to defend well enough to then hit teams on the counter, and they're not going to outplay teams in Europe because they don't have that ability. No,
they don't. And we'll come on to talk about this in terms of recruitment, because I think they have signed a few bigger players, Asgard or Chomiti or Fernandez, but as we'll come on to discuss, the issue with the summer recruitment is apart from Jeji Gisama, you're looking at it who's done anything really consistently. But last season, if we just focus on last season, Clement's strength in Europe was his weakness domestically, because Rangers couldn't really control games with the ball. They needed to play into space, which is why towards the end of his tenure, they looked better against USG when they beat USG at home, the champions of Belgium, but then looked entirely uncomfortable when they have to try and break Queen's Park down a few days later. There would have been an acceptance, I think, had the Rangers Thursdays went if the Rangers Saturdays were improving. But right now, as you say, you've tried to strip that away and build a team for domestic football. But Rangers don't have a clear and obvious strength. They don't have a clear and obvious game that suits them. I think Danny Rule's almost a bit of a sideshow in the discussion at the moment, because it's clearly not his fault, and I think he's made some good alterations early on. But what they inherited was not a winning formula, because Rangers need to have a template to dominate domestically, and that wasn't going to dominate domestically. But the point you rightly raise is, at least they had those European nights. At least you could see in certain game states, they know how to be a team. At the moment, you don't have that in Europe or domestic football. And now the risk is you have 4 more games, which will only kind of not improve the mood, put it that way, because unless Rangers go and have a miracle 4 out of 4 wins, and we threw those numbers up on the screen, Braga have been the second best performing team on the basis of those underlying numbers so far. Rangers have been the second worst. It's a big ask to do anything from here. Yeah,
and it's something that I think we as journalists can maybe forget about sometimes, that football's supposed to be enjoyed. It's supposed
Is
to...
Is it? Really?
Yeah, I know it's not been very enjoyable for a while. I just like to remind that point. But it's something that's supposed to be enjoyed, and it's something that 40,000 people last night will have all paid a pretty penny to go and watch.
Absolutely.
And you look at a team who just looked so completely out of their depth, so completely overrun. And I think Ali McCoist summed it up perfectly last night when he said, I think this Roma team have 3 or 4 more gears that they could have went into if they needed it, because they just looked as though they were passing the ball around the midfield at will. Nobody in the Rangers team looked as though they could get near it. And even the few times that Rangers did manage to get up the park, you had absolutely no faith that they were going to do anything with it. And I think the biggest criticism I can offer from the other night is that it was boring. It was just boring to watch.
It's predictable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it predictably bad. Yeah. That's where they were. Yeah. So that kind of brings us on to the recruitment side of this. And the recruitment has been talked about till the cows come home so far this season. We all know the fans' thoughts towards Kevin Thelwell, towards Dan Purdy, towards Patrick Stewart, the team who have been charged with this rebuild. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure Russell Martin did have a say in that. I'm sure he will have brought in players in his image as well. But these guys behind the scenes have brought these players in for longevity. They've not brought these players in straight away. They've brought these players in thinking, okay, these are guys we can build the team around over the next few years. And you look at this list of players that Rangers have bought in this summer, and I can't see anybody that is looking going, he's going to be a Rangers player for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think you sum it up very well, because so far, out of the players, and we're going to throw this up on the screen too, but the players who've come in this summer, you're looking at it and thinking, who is, as I said a minute ago, who's performed well? I think you could say someone like Derek Cornelius, if he gets a bit more football, he's not played that much. I think he's been good when he's come on to a game. Jeji Gisama's blown hot and cold, but I think the reason he's sometimes blown cold is because he's playing in so many different positions to accommodate for other people. But for me, this also, the conversation we had a couple of months ago in the studio, one of the first shows we did on a Saturday, was effectively suggesting that, look, Rangers have done this backwards with Russell Martin. They've made an over-ambitious appointment really early. They've attached their whole philosophy to basically a new guy's ideas. They've not built up, they've not got a base to work from, which you've seen, for example, Tony Bloom's teams have sometimes done that. There's no suggestion they're going to move on from Derek McInnes at the moment, Hearts, are they? But they've kind of made a sensible, bit of a pragmatic choice in the dugout, and maybe a more ambitious one can come in the future. And I think the same thing has happened with the playing squad. For me, Rangers so badly needed a new core. And at the moment, they do not have that new core. They're still relying on last season's core.
You spoke about this spine for the last few months about how Rangers just don't have that, and they haven't invested in that. And you would think that if for the amount of money spent, and we can't ignore the amount of money spent, that there's a vast amount of in transfer fees that have been put out the door by Rangers this summer. They don't have anybody that you can really hang your hat on to say that is a guaranteed starter. He makes the team better. He's a player to be relied upon. I think you look at Joe Rothwell. The idea that Joe Rothwell was here to build this midfield around now seems like such a folly to think about where we were 3, 4, 5 months ago, thinking Joe Rothwell is going to be the new number 6. And this is Joe Rothwell who can't get on the park. He can't get off the bench.
Joe Rothwell, he's now played, so since Bruges is obviously like I've been told I need to stop saying Nadir. So, and there's been
I think you stole that word from one of my pieces, by the way. I dig you up on that.
There's been too many anyway. So the point is futile. But Bruges is like the sliding doors moment where you're like,
it's the basement already of this season. It cannot get any worse.
Exactly.
At risk of sounding like Mick McCarthy.
It can. So before Bruges, hopefully not. Before Bruges, you have Max Aarons and Joe Rothwell kind of seem to like ceremonially take the Raskin and Tavernier positions. Tavernier comes off the bench as soon as things start to go badly at Bruges, and the only time he's been rested in the 13 games since is the 45 minutes against Hibs. Once again, Rangers completely over-reliant on James Tavernier, and James Tavernier, I think, while not without his faults, is just continuously available in a club that has declined around him in the last number of years. So Rothwell's started 3 of those 13 games since Club Bruges.
And I think what's telling is we've been around the club for the past few months. So obviously we're in there a few times a week when you see people, you're in there after games, usually in the bowels of the stadium rather. And what has been quite abundantly clear is that James Tavernier is more angry now than he's ever been. I think he's more frustrated now than he's ever been. You see it in the way that he carries himself. He can see the declining quality around about him.
Well, there's been a couple of interviews where he's, I think after Dundee and after Hearts at home and after...
and then there was the one after Brann where he came out and basically eviscerated his teammates and said that this was appalling.
Which you've not seen him really do ever.
No.
Listen, if we put up on the screen now, this is just Rangers' scattergraph of minutes played by each in the Scottish Premiership. And again, kind of self-explanatory, people can pause the video, but you've got the minutes played up along the left of the screen and along the bottom of the age. And you can see the players who've played the point I've kind of made is that your 4 most important players are still Suter, Raskin, Tavernier and Butland. And Gassam has become your attacker who's played the most. And that has played out in the minutes in the Scottish Premiership. For me, the where recruitment conversation needs to start, Blair, is that this needed to change. So I think that James Tavernier still had a place to play this season. That I think that not to crack open an old debate, he makes issues. He has issues. He's not faultless, but I don't think by any stretch of the imagination he's been Rangers' biggest issue or anything close to that. I think this was a group of players who needed support and needed like 3 or 4 experienced players who you can count upon, regardless of the game circumstance, the tactical approach, the manager, who could just deal with it, who could do it. And Gassam has shown flashes of that. But again, I don't think he's been helped by playing at left wing one game, right wing one game, right wing back one game. I don't think any player, as you've seen with the Rangers over recent years, can properly develop when that is the case. Then you get on to loan players. Loan players work, I think, when it's Václav Černý for one season, Adala Sima for one season, Malik Tillman for one season. When you've got 4 loan players in Giga, Aarons, Magoma and Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore and Magoma, I think, are both talented players. But Magoma's last week kind of shows he'll blow hot at points and he'll blow cold at points because he's 19 and because he's the only left back there and because it's a big ask for him and because he's not played a ton of football. Similarly, Mikey Moore, still learning the game, clearly a very talented player. But a point I've made on the podcast this week, as you look at Amad Diallo and Tillman, and even to a degree Fabio Silva, who's now kicking a ball for Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is just a difficult place to develop.
Yeah.
It's such a difficult place to develop. And I think those lessons should have been heeded from recent seasons, because you look at that back 5 and all of them are out of contract or out of loan at the end of the season.
Yeah, well, this is the issue that troubles me, because you look at that defence and You've got Jack Butland could be playing in front of an entirely new back four in 12 months' time.
Yeah.
Because you've got James Tavernier, who is out of contract, all right, I'm saying. John Suter, who's out of contract. You've got Nasser Giga, who's a loan player. And then you've got Jaden Megoma, who's a loan player. And the fact that how are you supposed to build any sort of consistency and how are you supposed to put any sort of roots down if you don't even know if your back four are going to be there in 8 months' time? Which then, not to kick the can too far down the road, but if you're Rangers and you're going into June of next year and you're having to buy an entire new back four, that is a big gamble. Because especially if it's the same people that are doing the buying last summer. Is any Rangers fan really trusting the same people to buy an entire new defence? I think you'd be hard pushed to find one.
Yeah, and also, again, another separate conversation, but how much more difficult could European football be to qualify for next season, depending on where Rangers finish? So loan players make sense if they make an immediate impact, because like if you, the cost on wages and also fee, and you know, these are not insignificant wages because a lot of these players are coming from the Premier League, which tells you everything you need to know. It only makes sense if they make a big impact, like a Cherney, like a Sima, because otherwise you're playing them in place of other players you could be developing, and you're not getting them at the end of this year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you've got the loan players. I think you have the conversation of how many players from last season currently get into this season's squad. I still think Cyril Dessers does. Hamza Gaman, let's not even go there because
every time that League One page posts another photo of him mocked up with Ronaldo, my heart breaks a little bit.
But you see, on the topic of developing players, Hamza Gaman played in his best position for 2 months. That tells you everything you need to know about how difficult it seems to be to develop players here. Yeah. And then you have you have that topic. How many players from last season get into this season's squad? Václav Černý replacing his goals, and there's more examples. Even left back Jefty and Ridvan availability with Ridvan okay. And then you look at it, Blair, and you say, well, even last season when Rangers had a terrible domestic campaign, got 77 points, they still had Igaman and Jefty to flip for a profit. They'd found them from markets, new markets, similar methods maybe to what you'd see with a Club Brugge or a PSV in European football. You can only do that when you buy at a relatively low cost, which is why the Yusuf Chermiti fee has attracted so much attention, because he would have to be an absolutely incredible player for Rangers to make a lot of money on him, and he still needs to do a lot of developing. And again, when you have that price tag here, it's very, very difficult to do. So you have a couple of assets, and you know, Diomande and Raskin, both of whom were here, and Gassam, because you got them for a relatively low cost because of Sheffield Wednesday's issues. Otherwise, you look at the money spent on Antman and even Manny Fernandez. That money needed to translate into a player that you build your defence around for the next few years, like Stephen Gerrard with Connor Goldson, or an attacker like Ryan Kent, who is a linchpin, and you grow and develop and you add other players around him. Otherwise, you just can't build. And Rangers are still building around the players who couldn't get them over the line last season. And that's why I think it feels very, very familiar, because they don't have this new spine to the team. Yeah,
it seemed like Rangers had started, they had put one foot into this, let's follow this Ajax, Porto, pick whatever team you want, model of, okay, let's try and source these players from far-flung parts of the world, bring them in for a nominal fee, and then if they're any good, we can flip them on. Yeah. And let's be honest, if they weren't any good, the pressure wasn't that high on them, because I remember when Hamza Igaman came in last season and Philippe Clement was holding them back. He was holding them back, and there was a little bit of growing unrest because the season hadn't started well, and it's like, oh, why have the club spent 1.8 million, whatever it was, on a guy who we can't even see playing?
And he was injured
and he didn't speak English, and it was a really tricky time for him coming in. But the issue, and we've said this before, but the difference between a player like that and a player, most of the players that have come in this summer, is that, and I don't think fans are stupid. I think fans have watched enough football that they know what a player when they see one. And as soon as you seen Hamza Igaman on the park, you went, oh, he's got something. We don't know what it was. It was raw as hell, and he was just he was running through people. Everyone. He was nutmegging people. I remember you had a chart up going at one point on how many nutmegs he had on the go. Yeah, I remember turning up at games and you would just be there with your ticking them off. But you could see straight away that he had something about him, and he had a touch, and he had that little bit of flair, and he had something a bit different, and you went, he's a bit special. Now, I don't want to hammer Yusuf Chermiti, right? I don't think that helps anybody. I don't think going in on the boy is particularly conducive to making him a better player.
And it's not his fault that he cost
of course
a lot
not.
of money.
Of course not.
Yeah.
But you look at him, and in terms of the redeeming factors, as a footballer, they are few and far between.
He's 21, so I think Egerman was 22 when he arrived. But Egerman and Jefty cost you a combined well under 3 million combined.
Yeah.
Incredible value, really, for what you get. Now, you've also got to remember that was the first summer. Rangers didn't have that much money. They had a lot of difficulties with how they were trying to build a squad that summer. Could that have been repeated with one or two of those players every single summer while you, build a bit of a Scottish core around it? Connor Barron, I don't think is going to be Rangers' best number 6, but he has a place on a rotation basis. I think Lyle Cameron does too. Mm-hmm. I think that was a model that had legs in it. But more than anything, because even if Rangers have had more money this summer than they have had in previous summers, if you spend this much money on players, it's just difficult to make a profit. It's difficult to sell them on. And for where Rangers are in the food chain, they need to do that. Yeah. They can sell it in a clever way to not make it sound like they're a stepping stone, which given the size of the club they can't be. But that's how they need. That is a vital factor to generating revenue. And I think Chermiti, he's 21. You can tell that physically he's still putting everything together, and he's quick. And I thought he made some good runs last night. But the whole thing, Blair, is that the conversation is framed by the fact he cost £8 million.
Yeah,
see, if he was on a loan to buy basis, you'd maybe be going, okay, he's not played much football. Let's give him some time. But again, when you've spent that money on him and Fernandez and Antman and others, you need these guys to be. That's so much money.
Yeah. And also, there's nobody to take the heat off him.
Yeah.
Last season.
Because Majovski's not.
Yeah, Majovski's not playing his part. I said the other day on the podcast, I was really disappointed in Majovski because I was really excited about him coming in. I thought he was a certainty to score goals for Rangers. But you look at last season, right? Danilo cost £6 million. Not far away from £8 million. Also quite a significant layoff. But he was not getting anywhere near the stick that Chermiti was getting because Dessers was scoring, because Egerman was scoring, because Czerny was scoring. Now you're looking around that team going like that. There's no goals here. Yeah. There's no goals on this side. Yeah. And your £8 million striker is not providing them. So he's target number one when it comes to pointing the blame for why there aren't any goals in this team. Yeah. And then you look at your other multi-million-pound striker in Bojan Majovski. And I think there is also, and this is a bit more of an abstract point, so bear with me, but I feel like the players that were sold in the summer were also a very particular type of personality as well. I'm looking at Cyril Dessers, for example, big voice. Yeah. A man who came out
in the leadership group,
absolutely,
in the dressing room.
Yeah, would come out, would address things. If there was a bad result, Cyril Dessers would be out talking to them. A winner, like won things before in his career, played all over the place, also did score his fair enough share of goals. When you take a voice like that out of the dressing room, and I think this has been something that has just been gradually eroded away at Rangers over the past few years. You look back, I seen a photo the other day of that team that went to Borussia Dortmund and won. And the thing that really struck me about that team is how many leaders were in that team. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, let's not be revisionist about it. That was also a team that went to Celtic Park and got absolutely battered that infamous night in January under the lights where they were 3-0 down going on 10. But in general, you look at that team: Scott Arfield, John Lundstrup, Connor Goldson, Leon Balogun, Calvin Bassey, Alan McGregor, Ryan Jack, Ryan Kent, Morelos, Tavernier, all big personalities. Yeah. You look around that dressing room now and it just doesn't seem to be there. It just doesn't seem to have that leadership. Yeah. And epitomised as well the forgotten man Kieran Dowell. Remember when we were told this at the start of the year that he was one of the leadership group, that Russell Martin wanted him as one of the key figures in the team. He's posted without leave for the past 3 months. And
obviously Kevin Dowell's kind of repeated this point about recruitment being collaborative, and I do think that is something that we don't quite get as much in Scotland as what is just accepted in England. Yeah. That it is not just a manager coming in and saying, I would like this player, this player, this player. However, you look at Magoma and the fact that, he was someone who'd worked with Russell Martin before, Max Aarons, Joe Rothwell, that there is a lot of links, and there clearly was a big influence, I think, from Russell Martin in recruitment, largely because also it was done over a short period of time in a couple of months.
Absolutely.
The
thing that Kevin Thelwell, I think, is not grasping is that this isn't England.
Yeah.
This is not the English Championship.
Yeah.
You can finish third in the English Championship, win the playoffs, and be heralded as having a wonderful season.
Yeah.
You finish anywhere outside the top one, and it's a national inquest up here.
And that's why, like, someone like I think Magoma will have a good career. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think Mikey Moore will have a good career, and to be fair to him, he's showing up a bit more in recent weeks.
Mikey Moore will get sold for 50 million quid at some point in his career.
Yeah.
Certainty.
Because and Amad Diallo, after he came up here, went on to be the best player in the English Championship the season after, didn't he? Malik Tillman is now was Bayer Leverkusen signing to replace Florian Wirtz.
Yeah.
Fabio Silva got signed by Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah.
The reason I'm using all these examples is better players have struggled to develop here in better teams.
Yeah.
You need a core group of individuals, I think, who can allow young players room to grow and develop and make mistakes. And when you don't have that, you're just really up against it.
Yeah.
And that has been the story of this season, because then you need when things are going badly on the pitch, you need individuals to pull you out of it. And I think aside from Tavernier and Raskin, who's off it at the moment, and Gassam, as you say, where are the goals coming from? Where are the moments coming from?
Yeah, where are the big voices in that dressing room? The other stat there that you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, but just to go back to 13, 11 and 9 incomings in the last 3 summers, that points to just flailing wildly between transfer strategies.
Yeah.
Any sort of club with any sort of consistency, you just want to be adding 1 or 2.
Yeah.
You want to build your core, you want to build round about that. Now, I completely understand. Rangers are a selling club. We know this. I think every Rangers fan will accept this. Calvin Bassey was at the peak of his powers in a Rangers shirt when he was sold. And generally, now, forgive me if I'm wrong, forgive me if I'm looking back with rose-coloured glasses, I don't think there was much complaint with Calvin Bassey being sold.
No.
Because he was sold for a good fee.
Right time.
At exactly the right time. I don't think Rangers could have got any more money for Calvin Bassey at any other point in his career. And he was coming off the back of a great season. That he, for a lot of those games, was one of the big reasons why Rangers made it to the Europa League final. And if you'd gone into the next season with him as your core of that defence, Rangers would have been a lot better placed to win the Scottish Premiership. But the fans weren't up in arms at the board going, why are you selling our best player? They said, this is a young boy who's developed, he's shown a bit of talent, and now we're getting a great fee for him. So I don't think there's a real reticence from Rangers fans not to want to buy into this model.
No.
But when you're signing 13 players, when you're signing 11 players, when you're signing 9 players, that is not just you've sold one big player, so let's maybe get 2 in to replace him and see how it goes. That is, we are ripping it up and starting again every single June.
Yeah, because also not all transfers work, and even the best clubs, I think that the generally accepted stat is like 60% of transfers work. So and the current regime will rightly point at that and say, oh look, we inherited something that's unstable, but that's why this summer, as I say, keep going back to the spine of the club. Spine of the team gives you room to grow, gives individuals room to grow. Nothing sustainable, I think, really can happen when you've got those numbers incoming and outgoing every single season. You can't change your squad mid-season, Blair. Danny Rule has been asked more and more about the January window in recent days, and it's going to be interesting to see if he speaks about it a little bit more. But he will know that managers live and die by the quality they have. And at a club like Rangers, we like to focus on the nuances, but they do matter. How a player reacts to adversity, whether they can deal with the crowd, how they lead, you maybe only learn about that sometimes when they're in it. And they need additions in January, which we shouldn't have been talking about to that degree, given the money that was spent and the number of players who came in. Don't get me wrong, of course you can't completely overhaul the squad in one window, but again, then the question is, well, should you maybe just keep Jeffrey for one more season, or even Robbie Fraser's a backup left back, so you've got another. I don't think he was going to be Rangers' first choice left back. That's just 2 names off the top of my head. Did you need to transition it a little bit more instead of going in?
Two-footed to try and change the whole squad, because it's not even the point where we're going, additions need to be made in January. You're now looking going, do we need to start selling some of these guys that have just already come in because you went, they're not good enough, or try to get them out on loan? I look at Emmanuel Fernandez for want of a better example, but it's doing him no good sitting on the Rangers bench. He's at £3.5 million to sit on the Rangers bench. He has to be out and playing football. Yeah. He has to be out going playing on loan somewhere. You look at Oscar Cortez as well, another incredibly expensive mistake. Be that as it may, that was the previous regime. That's one of these examples you were talking about there. It's maybe not going to work. You don't know, Oscar Cortez might come back as double the player. I don't see it myself, but he might come back as a great player. But that was a punt that the previous regime took, and that didn't pan out. It just seems like this current incumbents have taken so many of those gambles, and none of them seem to have really worked. Yeah,
you're right with Cortez, because again, a whole other podcast. But then, if you have an Egerman and a Chefty for every Cortez, then your model gets away with it.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
I've just read the book by Ian Graham, How to Win the Premier League, on how Liverpool kind of revolutionised their transfers with data. And he says about 60% of transfers work. That is quite low. Yeah. And that is probably one of the guys who's been the best in the business. It's a difficult thing to get right. It's a difficult club to recruit for. But as you say, you're looking ahead to January thinking Rangers need quite a lot. And what's the state of their season going to be like then? Because they're out of the League Cup.
Yeah.
They're one more result from being out of the league, I'd argue. They're out of Europe in effect unless they win their next 4 games or 3 games and 1 draw.
And you're not going to get... This comes back to my earlier point that this is not England. You're not going to get 5 years. No. You're not going to get that. It's been 5 months, and the stadium is in mutiny.
Yeah, there's only 41,000 people there. You only get five. You can only talk about building, I think, at a club like Rangers when you win.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's great. Yeah. But you need which Danny Rule, I think, has understood. But he's inherited this. He's inherited this really tricky first 5 run of games. But you can only
far too early to be judging Danny Rule for me. I actually don't think you can judge Danny Rule for another couple of months down the line, because these are none of his players. He is essentially working with one hand tied behind his back with this squad that he's inherited.
And you could see last night, again, people we're going on to different tangents here, but you could see last night when he's at his most animated as he's encouraging people to press, and he's moving up kind of almost onto the pitch a little bit himself. How he wants his team to play is also going to be difficult, I think, in mid-season, because they've had a pre-season for a very different style of football that dominates the ball, and he wants them to be hunt like a pack off it.
Yeah.
And last night they couldn't get Roma are a good team, but as you say, in recent seasons, I think you'd have banked on Rangers to at least match them, and last night they didn't match them.
Yeah, I think I was talking to someone at the press conference, Jack Bolton's press conference the other day, and we were in agreement that this Rangers team of old, there's a good argument to be made they wouldn't have lost any of these 4 games.
Yeah.
They'd have
had at least 7 points. Yeah, at least.
At worst, you would say at least a draw against Roma. Yeah. Before we go, there is a game tomorrow. Yes. It is away at Dens Park, Rangers against Dundee. Of course, Dundee have already taken the scalp of Celtic in recent weeks, so they're not to be trifled with. They do have a couple of decent players. I know Congreve on the wing is a player that I've been looking at a little bit closely in the last few weeks. He certainly seems to be one of the danger men. You've got Simon Murray, who always seems to cause Rangers problems. They are weak at the back, so I think they can be hit there. But then, as we've spoke about for the last half hour or so, Rangers don't really have a lot of weapons up front to really pierce any defence, no matter how weak it will be. So I think it'll be a tricky game. It'll be tough, especially at Dens Park. Dens Park is a hell of a place to go at the best of times. But on the flip side of that, if Rangers do manage to get 3 points tomorrow, that's 3 league wins in a row. You're then looking at 2, with respect, winnable home games after that. Does the picture start to look a little bit rosier if Rangers do start putting those league wins together?
I can get the table up in front of me, so I've got some evidence. So Rangers have played 15 points, Hearts have 29. So if Rangers win at the weekend, or when the games go even, they're how many is that? 11 points behind Hearts? So, as I say, you're one more defeat away from it being terminal. Yeah, they can build some momentum in the league a little bit, but again, they've not shown enough yet to show that they will.
Yeah, I think to really make you believe that that's going to happen.
I think at the moment, it's not as if they win 3-0 against Dundee on Sunday, people are going to turn around and say, told you so, because there's not that evidence of it yet. They could well, Blair. Of course, there's players playing within themselves, and there is more quality, I think, in that squad than is being shown. But let's see, because they've only just put back-to-back wins together. So talking about 3, 4, 5 wins in a row, I think we still need to see it before it happens. Interesting to see what changes Danny Rule makes. Looking at it there, Rangers have conceded 10 goals and scored 12 goals in 10 Scottish Premiership games. They need to correct. Poor. They need to really get a bit of a better margin before I think we talk about much aside from the beginning of things.
Yeah. Well, that'll do us for this morning. We hope it wasn't too ranty.
Sorry, everyone.
I do think we've got a lot off our chest. If there's anything you want to get off your chest, leave it in the comments below. What do you think the team will be that Danny Rule will go tomorrow for Dundee? What do you think the score will be? And where do you see this Rangers team going in the next few months for all of our sakes? Hopefully putting some wins together and finding a little bit of consistency. But until next time, thanks for watching and thanks for listening.